Sister Kathy, you want to have an opening prayer?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for your great love and mercy, and we thank you for your watch care. We ask you for the Holy Spirit today as we open your word and ask for the light to shine upon our path, and we ask you for understanding, Father, for thy name's sake and for thy glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Okay. I'm going to go through William Miller's dream and get that dead-ended in this presentation. I know that this is something that we've studied for many years now. And as I said yesterday, there might be some corrections. Like I look at 1919. That's probably true. But anyway, I'll start. Anyone not have those notes? Rick doesn't.
Was from yesterday?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
I've always struggled with where to place the gathering together of the jewels in William Miller's dream, because the logic is that from 1863 to 1989 is 126 years. 126 years is a symbol of the 2520. It's a symbol of the scattering of William Miller's dream. The scattering begins in 1863. Project 126 years. You're at 1989, time of the end. There's an increase of knowledge. So it seems like when the Dirt Brush Man begins to put his jewels back together, it'd be 1989. But the reality of it is it's 1989, 9/11 have characteristics that allow you to interchange, if that's the way to say it, or apply them in both places. And I've thought for a long time and not been real confident on how to prove it, that the box gets opened up after 9/11. But now I think it's pretty clear that's the case. So that's the premise of here. And the reason for it, I don't know if you're aware of it, but what is being taught in the Omega apostasy is error. Okay, you hear it, you shouldn't even be listening to it. But there's things that we're learning in the opening up of this message that we may have some wrong premises, but it doesn't seem quite the same. And what I mean by that is, whether you're aware of it or not, there's a controversy going on right now about the prediction before midnight. And some people have tried to draw me into the controversy, and I'm unwilling to do so because I don't view it as error. I view it as the Lord opening up a truth, and I'm trusting that He's going to make it clear, okay? May 2nd, 1844, Samuel Snow prints an article which has been identified primarily by the African Brethren and Tabot as the prediction before midnight. But people like Tanya and Duane have went back into the history of Samuel Snow and the development of the Midnight Cry message, and that's what Duane's going to share here when he comes back in. And he's shown that leading up to May 2nd, Samuel Snow is already putting this message in the public arena, so to choose May 2nd randomly as opposed to choosing any other. And July 17th, I think, 18th, Theodore's discovered another publication before the 21st. Okay, so this being midnight, which is, I should do it that way, July 21st. I think he's arguing now, Theodore, that the prediction before midnight would be here at July 18th. And there's some all the way back here. So the argument is there a prediction before midnight? That's the first argument, because the other side of the issue says there's no relevant light that comes until after midnight, okay? Particularly when it comes to Daniel 11. No significant light until we get to here. But there's repeatedly illustrations that before the waymark of midnight, there's a prediction before midnight, okay? It's repeated. So we're in a discussion now where amongst us where I think we all agree there is a prediction before midnight. And the argument is, why is it that Tabo and the other brethren have chosen May 2nd to say that was the prediction before midnight? And I'm not willing at this point to get militant about people being right or wrong on this, because we've realized that May 2nd was Passover in that history, and that from here to here is 81 days. So that, for me, that gives me two witnesses that May 2nd, 1844 is a waymark. Okay, if we find later, and by later I mean, I don't have anything up there to illustrate. If we find later that yes, it's a waymark, but it's not the prediction before midnight, it's some other relevant waymark, then so be it. And my point is if we had the first outline that we used to present the reform lines, we had the first, second, third angel's message on those reform lines. And I don't think in the first ones we had the midnight cry in there, okay? But over time we see the midnight cry as a waymark. And then over time we see midnight as a waymark. So the line of the tribe of Judah has been opening these things. So May 2nd, for whatever reason, Passover and 81 days before here it's unshakable if you got two witnesses. Now, maybe it isn't the prediction before midnight, perhaps. But I don't know.
One piece of information that Brother Tabo left out at the camp meeting when he first presented this was basically the death warrant of Jesus Christ, which gave Samuel Snow the confidence to present his thesis even forward and with much more impetus, with much more force. And this is a discovery that he had found through some newspapers, which basically gave him the confidence to understand that basically Jesus was crucified in the spring, and according to the feast, everything will end in the fall. And now some of us among us saying that this is basically a false plate, that it wasn't really real. It was a false discovery, and it was based on deceitfulness. But I would hate to think that the Lord would do anything in that matter. But that's exactly in the May 2nd article. That's exactly before Samuel Snow begins to present his ideas again. He presents this death warrant of Jesus Christ, and he uses that.
Does anyone understand what she's saying?
Nope.
See, that's what I'm saying. It was left
Well,
out.
no. What you're saying is not clear. We don't know what you're saying.
Okay, in the article of May 2nd of
Okay, in that
1844,
article up there,
the Midnight Cry, that Samuel Snow has his article that Brother Tabo presented as saying like, okay, this is why it's the prediction before midnight. Brother Tabo said that Samuel Snow had found some sort of proof that gave him the confidence that he was right and that he was moving forward and pushing upon the brothers to believe his ideas. And that piece of evidence was left out from his presentation. When I moved forward and I asked him and I showed that to him, he was not even aware of it. And then Brother Theodore,
he wasn't aware of what?
that there was this death warrant of Jesus Christ, a plate that it was discovered, and that basically gave the confidence of Samuel Snow that he was right about his
Okay, a
interpretation.
death warrant of Jesus Christ, a plate that was discovered. What do you mean?
By that discovery,
It was-
he got the confidence
What
to
discovery?
produce the article, right?
Yeah,
It was a sentence
let her walk
rendered-
through it. She's the one that's just trying to present this.
It's a sentence rendered by Pontius Pilate.
No, don't read it. What is it?
It's the sentence of Jesus Christ.
Okay, what you're saying is that Samuel Snow came across a piece of information that had been published.
An archaeological discovery.
Okay, that happened in his lifetime or years before?
Before him.
Okay, and you're saying that's what gave him the confidence.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, the archaeologist said, hey, that was a false discovery.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't have confidence that the Lord would motivate or inspire Samuel Snow based upon a piece of false information.
Amen.
Why?
It just doesn't work that way.
Mm.
The whole focus for Samuel Snow was basically.
Well,
to
I mean,
remove-
Miller was operating on some false premises, and his message was
the fact that
a
he-
glorious manifestation of the power of God.
Jesus did die in the spring, not in the fall. And that's Samuel Snow, his whole focus was to change people focus from the spring to the fall. And that's what he had used to show the people that, see, Jesus died in the spring, and the Day of Atonement, basically that finishes everything, the cleansing, everything else falls into the fall. And he used that evidence to prove his point. So, prediction before midnight, I don't know.
Was his evidence correct?
Yeah, Jesus did die in the spring. Now the date that they were using it, there's different dates in different areas. But that I don't think that he's really focused on the date on it, but he's just focusing it was in the
So
spring.
you're saying that Tabo and the African brethren are without that knowledge, they recognize that on May 2nd publication, Samuel Snow has a more zealous
Yeah.
conviction of his truth, but you've dug into it or someone's dug into it and shown that his motivation came from a incorrect premise.
Well, because it doesn't matches up with the date that they've discovered. And because of that, they put it aside as saying that it's incorrect.
Okay, so-
and this piece of evidence was actually burned in a fire, so it's no longer available.
So that's the issue that's going on. And what I'm saying is when it comes to the other side, for instance, I got a paper here that, Lord willing, we may respond to that are saying that the Millerites, they don't say it in these terms, but the Millerites announced the opening of the judgment, but they had a misunderstanding about the judgment. They thought it was the second coming of Christ. And therefore, we will have the same kind of misunderstanding. We will announce the opening of the judgment of the living, but we're going to have the same kind of misunderstanding. It's on 9/11. And what they've done there is they've reversed or created a new paradigm, a new approach. And what I mean by that, from the very beginning of this message, for whatever reason, we recognized and taught repeatedly that the Millerites announced the opening of the judgment, and at the end of Adventism, we announced the close of the judgment. So we've never taught in this movement that the purpose of this movement is to announce when the judgment of the living was going to begin. We've said that the shut door message that is repeatedly in the scriptures and the spirit of prophecy is our message, and we're announcing when judgment ends, not opens. So you have a completely different approach from what has been taught in this message for 20 years, and these guys are teaching a new approach and saying that the old approach is error. My point is, I'm not viewing this discussion here at the same level. Personally, I'm not willing to start saying, okay, this is heresy or whatever. Anyone else have any input on that?
I just see that the methodology that the Lord has been opening up to us, and all the confirmations we're getting with the way everything overlays and the revealings that He's given us of the number 81 everywhere. I mean, that to me is building a stronger weight of evidence that you can see that, you know, July 21st was midnight, and 81 days before that it comes to it. So to me, that's a pretty strong argument.
Yeah, the May 2nd's a waymark. I'm convinced of that.
It is. And William Miller gave his apology on May 2nd because that he had failed to recognize the correct date. So that's another thing that we never really put it there, but it's there. But what I want to point out to you, to these brethren that are trying to say what they're saying, they don't understand 1 Corinthians 9 and 10. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. In the light of the
1 Corinthians 13, 9 and 10.
9 and 10.
You left 13 out.
I'm
But go
sorry.
ahead.
Anyways, when that which is perfect is come, we know that at 9/11, the beginning of the fulfillment of the three angels' message began again in a perfect fulfillment. And if they're not recognizing 9/11 for what it is, they will not be able to follow through all the way to the end.
Well, they're not recognized. I wasn't trying to get off into there. I'm just trying to make a distinction between the errors that they're teaching that we are to meet and the internal discussion that's going on in this movement over new light that's coming. And it's not the same level, I don't believe. So, that being said, William Miller's dream. I'm going to argue that it gets opened up after 9/11, and that everything in the dream leads up to midnight. And therefore, what it's doing is, no matter the discussion of whether there is a prediction before midnight, the opening of the seventh seal comes before midnight, and I'm saying the opening of the seventh seal is the opening of Miller's casket, the full opening of his second casket, which was larger than the first and 10 times more bright than the first. I dreamed that God, by an unseen hand, sent me a curiously wrought casket about 10 inches long by 6 square, made of ebony and pearls curiously inlaid. To the casket there was a key attached. I immediately took the key and opened the casket, when, to my wonder and surprise, I found it filled with all sorts and sizes of jewels, diamonds, precious stones, and gold and silver coin of every dimension and value, beautifully arranged in their several places in the casket. And thus arranged, they reflect a light and glory equaled only to the sun. So, in order to try to push my premise, which I'm trying to do, when was it that Miller opens the casket? 1840, okay. You're going along with my original premise, but when was it in history? 1816, 1818. He's opening the casket, right? He's coming to understand these truths. And by 1818, he has the message in place. Okay, from 1818 to 1843 is the 25 years that is a period of time that's a waymark. In that history, you've got 3 witnesses just in that history alone of Adventism, that from 1818 to 1843, that's a prophetic symbol, that 25 years. You following me? Okay, so if he opened the casket in 1818, and 1818 is the beginning of a prophetic period, then what's 1843?
I thought by 1818 he was already convicted, so it was 1816 that he opened the casket, and specifically 9/11, 1816.
Yeah, I said that. I don't have a problem with that. But this here is a waymark. He's going to open the casket here in 1816. But he's not recognizing it for what it is at that point. He's opening it. He's just beginning to study. This gets crystallized for him by 1818. Wrong?
No, that's true.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. It's in place here.
That's a perusal study that he had from 1816 to 1818.
Yeah, so that from here to here, if the casket's opened here in 1818, and Jesus illustrates the end from the beginning, is the casket opened in 1843? It's already open there. You're not getting my point. Does Jesus illustrate the end from the beginning?
Always.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so in 1843, what is the pronouncement of Daniel 12? Blessed is he who waiteth and cometh to the 1335. That's 1843. There's a blessing here. And that blessing is the beginning of what? The 7th month movement?
That's right.
Okay. And in the 7th month movement, Samuel Snow is going to be used to open up the 7th seal.
That's where you have number 45 too.
So what I'm saying is you can mark it prophetically both at the beginning and the end. And if you mark it at 1843, then you're taking it into the history where the midnight cry is typified in our history. And the prediction before midnight to midnight is the opening of the 7th seal, the midnight cry in the time of the priests. Curiously, in several, I put this in some time ago, I never, when he says beautifully arranged in their several places, it just sounded awkward to me. So I looked up several. I don't understand several to mean separate and distinct. To me, several means there's a whole bunch, okay? So, but once you look at the old definition of several, it's saying that the truths that he saw were clear, they had their own place to position, and they had a relation to the other jewels. Okay, Brother Bob, next paragraph.
I want to point something out. There's 5 jewels mentioned here. You had the jewel, the diamonds, the stone, the gold, and the silver coin.
Okay, now, are you going to let her get away with that?
No, because what it's saying is several sizes of jewels, and then they go into the different,
Yes,
Yeah, but there's
so
sites.
it's not 5.
Then it'd be 4.
Before.
Diamonds, precious stones,
Right.
gold, and silver.
Right.
Oh, I see. So jewels is not jewels is
I think-
general.
It's general, talking
then it
about the
describes the
jewels, then it
jewels.
tells the
Okay,
jewels.
got you.
Okay.
okay, you didn't let her get away with it. Good, I wouldn't have if you hadn't. Or I wouldn't have either if you didn't respond. Okay, next paragraph.
I thought it was not my duty to enjoy this wonderful sight alone. Although my heart was overjoyed at the brilliancy, beauty, and value of its contents, I therefore placed it on the center table in my room and gave out word that all who had a desire might come and see the most glorious and brilliant sight ever seen by man in this life.
So, did he see that in 1816, or did he understand this in 1818? This is my point. It's 1818 where he's under conviction of this message. So, Brother Bob, what's it mean that come and see is in boldface and underlined? You read it. Explain it to us.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. Someone want to help him what it means come and see there? You guys are mumbling.
Revelation.
Yeah, Christ says come.
Revelation, that's close. Pardon me, Sister Pam.
I'm going to trying to find it in there.
In the opening of the 7 seals in Revelation, the first 4 seals, every time a seal is opened, the beast's going to say, come and see. So, Brother Rick, would you read Revelation 5, verses 1 through 7? Revelation 5, verses 1 through 7.
And I saw on the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book, written within and on the backside, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, Who is worthy to open the book, and to loose the seals thereof? And no man in heaven, nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereon. And I wept much, because no man was found worthy to open and to read the book, neither to look thereon. And one of the elders saith unto me, Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book, and to loose the 7 seals thereof. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent forth into all the world. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him that sat upon the throne.
So John's having a vision, and he sees God the Father with the Bible in his hand. Spirit of Prophecy defines this book that's sealed with seventh seal as the Bible, and it tells us that the reason the Bible's sealed up in various generations is from traditions and customs that are handed down from generations to generation. It's a sealing up of men's understanding of God's truth. But John's there having this vision, and he becomes part of the vision. Did he weep on his own accord?
For God's people, nobody was able to open the book.
Yeah, I get the face value of it, but he's a prophet being given a vision. He becomes part of the vision. Is this motivated from his humanity, or is inspiration making him weep because it needs to be noted as part of this prophetic testimony?
Depends on if it's elusive.
Okay, he's definitely, even if he wept on his own accord, if it was his own accord, he wouldn't have recorded it. He was led to record his weeping so that it would be part of the testimony. And I'm pointing that out because William Miller is going to weep later on in his dream. This is a waymark in this history. Okay, so Sister Pam, would you read chapter 6, the Lion of the tribe of Judah? Jesus is about to begin removing the seals one at a time. And will you read chapter 6, verses 1, 3, 5, and 7. 1, 3, 5, and 7.
Okay, 1. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder. One of the 4 beasts saying, Come and see. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, Come and see. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, Come and see.
Okay, so there's a distinction between the first 4 churches and the last 3 churches. And there's a distinction between the first 4 seals and the last 3 seals. And there's a distinction between the first 4 trumpets and the last 3 trumpets. Last 3 trumpets are woe trumpets. The last 3 seals don't have any beasts that are going to say, Come and see. The last 3 churches is a history that is a singular history. Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea, all were there in Millerite history. And Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea will all be in our history. But my point is, pioneer understanding, the basic understanding of these seals, is that these seals are parallel histories to the churches. The first seal, parallel history to the first church. What's the difference between the churches and the seals? The same history.
Reveals the internal work. The churches reveal the internal work. The seals are the outside.
External.
External.
It's internal, external. Yeah, that's the correct Millerite understanding at the general level. But we understand that all of the churches, all 7 of them, are going to be fulfilled in our history. In the history of the 144,000, all 7 churches. What's going on back there in the corner? I'm talking to her. Okay. All 7 churches. I hope I don't have to break you 2 up. All 7 churches are fulfilled in our history. Therefore, what about the seals?
They all have to be revealed.
They're all going to be repeated because their internal, external applications are going to happen. And how is it that all 7 seals are repeated in our history? Okay, the way that one of the ways that it's repeated is by going into the pioneer understanding, and I don't have this in here, but it's part of the public record, and showing that particularly James White's clear that the unsealing of the book of Daniel in Daniel 12, when the book of Daniel is unsealed, there's an increase of knowledge, and he identifies that unsealing and the increase of knowledge as parallel to the Lion of the tribe of Judah, removing the seals one at a time. Okay, so in Millerite history, the increase of knowledge begins in 1798. It goes all the way to 1844. That's in the terminology of Daniel 12. But in the terminology of the seals, the first seal is removed in 1798, and right before you get to October 22nd, 1844, the seventh seal is removed. So it's a secondary application. And that seventh seal would be the midnight cry in the Millerite history. And your secondary argument to uphold that is that the first truth that's opened up, the first seal that's removed by the Millerites, is the judgment hour message. And the last seal, the seventh seal, the midnight cry of Samuel Snow, is the judgment hour message. It's the perfection of the date of the judgment hour message that Miller was wrong on. So that's got to take place in our history as well, okay? But William Miller's dream is the link between Millerite history and our history in terms of the removing of the seals, and that's why when he places that casket on the center table, he says, "Come and see." What truth is that bringing into his dream? The removing of the seals.
Yeah.
It's showing that this is the Lord, the Lion of the tribe of Judah in Miller's time, opening up the truth to that generation. And Brother Bob, you read that, right?
Yes, I did.
What does it mean that I therefore placed it on a center table?
That he gave it the highest prominence, you know.
Anyone want to help him? It's true.
He tried to lift it up before everyone who would.
Where did he put it? On a chart or on a table?
Oh, table, yeah.
Habakkuk's table.
Yep.
All right, so when did he do that? May 2nd? No, not May 2nd. May of 1842.
Yeah.
All right. It's either Cheryl or Angie, next paragraph.
Actually, it was published on May 24, 1842.
No, it was published in May of 1842.
Yeah.
Better yet, it was published in 1842.
May 24th.
Yeah, I know.
1842.
Yeah, yeah. May of 1842.
The people began to come in, at first few in number, but increasing to a crowd. When they first looked into the casket, they would wonder and shout for joy. 1840 to 1840.
You know, I've always struggled with this, and it just clicked on me. This may not be true. I'm sorry to interrupt you. But he's talking about the recognition of his message that he's presenting. The people begin to come in at first a few in number, but increasing. So he's talking about the growth of this message. And it appears that has to go back before 1840. You know, that's when he began sharing it. 1831, first publicly shared. So if the paragraph before, if we're marking it as May 17th, was it? May 24th, 1842, then we're already in 1842 in the paragraph before, so it's kind of like it's out of sequence here. But what clicked on me is they were using charts before May. The May is we have the chart they used immediately before this chart in our office, and some of the stuff that's on that original chart doesn't get on here, but it's still interesting. But the point is, he put it on a chart right from the start. And I'll go one step further. It appears to me that the Millerites were using the charts as a teaching tool, as a point of reference. The one story where Joseph Bates goes to a camp meeting and he gets off the train that's right by the camp meeting, and as he gets off, there's people standing around all the trees, and in every tree this chart is, and there's people explaining it. Okay, so I would say the parallel to that in our history Because you don't see in Adventism, you don't see two things that you see in this movement from the very beginning. Number one, there's a few exceptions, but that isn't the general rule. Before this movement, there's very few times that you go to a camp meeting and when the preacher's preaching, he gives you a set of notes. Nor is there very few times that there's a whiteboard. In this message, you got to have a whiteboard. It's real frustrating if you don't have a whiteboard. I mean, the whiteboard in some countries originally was, I can remember going and buying butcher paper from a butcher shop, which is a pain to write on because it's got a little wax coating, but because there was nothing else available. But you have to have a whiteboard from the very beginning, and the Millerites had a chart. They were using charts right from the beginning. So I would now argue that when he placed it on the center table in his room and said, "Come and see," that's probably referring to the early charts.
In reference to come and see, in the Bible, Psalm 66:5 says, "Come and see the works of God. He is terrible in his doing towards the children of men." And I thought that's exactly what this chart says. Come and see what God has done.
The works of God. Okay, I'm sorry. Keep reading.
But when the spectators increased, everyone would begin to trouble the jewels, taking them out of the casket, 1863, and scattering them on the table. I began to think that the owner would require the casket and the jewels again at my hand, and if I suffered them to be scattered, I could never place them in their places in the casket again as before, and felt I should never be able to meet the accountability, for it would be immense. I then began to plead with the people not to handle them, nor to take them out of the casket. But the more I pleaded, the more they scattered, and now they seem to scatter them all over the room, on the floor, and on every piece of furniture in the room.
Now, when I first started teaching this, other people were teaching it too. I would argue, and it may have been a weak argument, but that if I had given everyone in this room an assignment to write an article, and William Miller submitted this article, I would tell him that he was being much too repetitious with the word scatter. Okay, grammatically it's not sound that you keep saying it over and over again. And we're counting them as we go through. And he's going to say scatter or scattered more than 7 times, but he's going to say it 7 times before he weeps. Okay, and then after he weeps, it's a different story. So there's a 7 times is a symbol of a scattering before he weeps. But if in the second sentence, when it says, when they first looked into the casket, they would wonder and shout for joy. I have 1840 to 1844 plugged in there. I still think that's accurate. When did they shout for joy? Sister Kathy Pippinger. When did they shout for joy?
The Millerites?
Yes, 1840 to 1844. What'd you say?
The Midnight Cry.
Who said that? Okay, Midnight Cry. Do you see that? They come in a few number at first, but they're looking at it, but there reaches a point where they shout for joy.
What about August 11, 1840?
August 11th, 1840, there's no one in there until after that. That's when the people begin to come in. Okay. Do you see that logic?
Yes.
You do. What about the rest of the class? Okay, because what I'm saying is if you turn to the next page, just to jump ahead, the last sentence says, I shouted with very joy, and that shout awoke me. What would that be? If the shouted for joy in this paragraph is the midnight cry in the Millerite history, I'm arguing this shout for joy is the midnight cry in our history. Okay? Because there's a place where Sister White says, my mind was carried to the future when the message will be repeated, behold, the bridegroom cometh. Okay, so we got direct reference that the midnight cry message is repeated in our history. Okay, but when the spectators increased, everyone would begin to trouble the jewels, taking them out of the casket. I have 1863. Is that valid? What are the jewels? Yeah, yeah, but they actually they began removing them in 1863. What are the jewels?
People and.
They're doctrines or truths. But you're right, they're people too. When we first presented this, there was a sister that really took me to task. And saying James White had commented on William Miller's dream, and the jewels are God's people. And you're going against James White, and James White fulfilled the role of Moses to the Advent people. So you're going off into apostasy. But Sister White has several places where she says the jewels are God's people. But the jewels are God's, she also says the jewels are God's doctrines, God's truths. So what is this teaching us? That it's both, but what does that mean?
That things can have more than one meaning.
Okay, things can have more than one meaning. What it means is that when the testing process begins at 9/11, that based upon what you eat, you are what you eat. Okay, if you're going to eat erroneous doctrines after 9/11 and you're in this movement professing that 9/11 is actually a fulfillment of prophecy, then you become those erroneous doctrines. As a man thinketh, so he is. So we're sanctified through the Word. Thy Word is truth. So we're transformed into Christ's image by eating the truth, but we're in a time period where you can choose between truth and error, and if you're eating the error, then you become the error. Okay, so it's both. It's people, it's God's people, and it's the truths. And you got to see that, because what happens with the dirt brush man? He's going to clean house, and it's not just that he's putting the doctrinal message back in order, he's also separating the wise and the foolish priests, Levites, Nethinims, right? Okay, so if you're counting the word scatter by that paragraph, it's been mentioned 4 times. Sister Cheryl?
I then saw that among the genuine jewels and coin they had scattered an innumerable quantity of spurious jewels and counterfeit coin. Post 1888.
Did you get the difference now here? In the previous paragraph, what are they doing when they're scattering? They're simply, if we're going to treat the jewels as truths here, all right? In the previous paragraphs, they're taking the truths and they're handling and then they're scattering them around the room. But here now is something new. Now they're introducing false doctrine. It's an escalation of the problems. I'm sorry, go ahead. Is post 1888 correct? Is this when you would mark false doctrine being introduced?
Sister White said that she had to deal with it even after the disappointment, the fanaticism that came among them.
And they had already rejected the Bible inspiration and spirit of prophecy.
Yeah, but Tanya, that's why I asked the question. What Tanya's saying is right. That they had to deal with error all the way through, from the beginning. But you're seeing the sequential history here, and what happened in 1888 that was just mentioned. They rejected the spirit of prophecy, they rejected the Bible, they rejected Jones and Wagner, the selected messengers, and they rejected the Holy Spirit, according to Sister White. And when you do that, you go into spiritualism and you begin inventing and introducing your own human doctrines.
They rejected the message of Revelation 18.
Yes? Yeah. Latter rain. Loud cry. Okay, so continue on, sorry.
I was highly incensed at their base conduct and ingratitude, and reproved and reproached them for it. But the more I reproved, the more they scattered. the spurious jewels and false coin among the genuine.
So they're introducing false doctrine. When does Conradi come up with the idea that the daily is the Protestant view? 1901. And even the Adventist, the Adventist historians have marked, there's one book out there, a well-known Adventist book called 13 Crisis Years. What does it mean by 13 crisis years? What's his title mean? From 1888 to 1901. Even Adventist historians acknowledge that these 13 years are a big crisis. You got all kinds of problems coming now because they've rejected the influence of the Holy Spirit in 1888. False doctrine, they're being confronted with it all. Spiritualism. All right, sorry. Oh, whose turn? Larry's or Jason's?
Was she done?
Yep.
I then became vexed in my physical soul and began to
Wait a second. I'm sorry. If we're going to maintain the James White part, after 1888, not only do you have false doctrine coming in, what do you have? False tares, as you said. You now have evidence that there are infiltrators into the church. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Did you connect that with James White?
Because James White argues that the jewels in William Miller's dream are God's people.
Yep.
And they are. But they're also God's truths.
It's interesting that happened 7 years after his death. He died in 1881, and 7 years later you have that.
I then became vexed in my physical soul and began to use physical force to push them out of the room. But while I was pushing one, three more would enter and bring in dirt and shavings and sand and all manner of rubbish until they covered every one of the true jewels, diamonds and coins, which were all excluded from sight. They also tore in pieces my casket and scattered it among the rubbish. I thought no man regarded my sorrow or my anger. I became wholly discouraged and disheartened and sat down and wept.
It's really sad, but you can see that in Adventism there are so many weird and stupid winds of doctrine blowing that you go into the churches and no wonder there's so much darkness in those churches because there's so much fanaticisms in so many different ways.
And you've got a chiasm mirror, a prophetic mirror. As I pushed out one,
A 3-1 combination.
it's a reverse, the 1 and 3. It's a prophetic mirror.
Okay, but what about tore in pieces my casket? What does Sister White say the casket is? The Bible. She says it more than once. So in 1919, W.W. Prescott is the historical figure associated with 1919, and they introduce his teaching in a book called The Doctrine of Christ, where he removes the prophetic message out of the Advent message. But there's a couple other things that he does. He's wanting Adventism to accept the Catholic definition of the Trinity. And when that battle wages on, when it reaches the 1930s and 1940s, and the faithful Seventh-day Adventists are opposing this movement of Prescott and others, there's a faithful guy, I never can remember his name. No, that was after. There was another guy. No, that was after. No, not Andreasen. Anyway, there's Washburn. Washburn.
The letter of Washburn that was sent to Daniel.
But in one of Washburn's letter, I don't know if we're talking about the same letter, perhaps, he argued that the way that you're pushing the Catholic Trinity doctrine and the way that you're pushing the false view of the daily is what? What was Washburn's argument? Is because you've set aside the King James Bible and you're using the modern Bibles. And the modern Bibles are what are giving men like W.W. Prescott the wiggle room to introduce these false doctrines. So 1919 is when this generation, where this takes place, begins. And I'm saying that what they did there is they threw out the King James Bible.
And Wilkinson wrote his book, our authorized version, authorized version,
Vindicated.
Vindicated, as a result of the 1919 conference. Because he saw what they were doing.
And then they responded to him and he responded back. It was a big issue back then that we know very little about. But Washburn's really direct with Prescott, saying, you've accomplished this by setting aside the King James Bible. And what is the significance of the King James Bible in Millerite history? The 220 years. It's 1611, the King James Bible is introduced.
7 years into making the 2520.
Yeah, 7 years in translating the King James Bible, but 220 years later takes you to where? 1831, William Miller's first public presentation. He has the rules, together with the King James Bible, that you can produce the end of the world light. He's restored the authority of God's Word over 220 years, which represents restoration. So the King James Bible and the authority of the King James Bible is established by William Miller's rules. And for them to tear up the Bible in this passage is a significant step backwards in history.
Along that line, right in the middle of that paragraph, it's jumping out at me, that it was the true jewels, diamonds, and coin, which were all excluded from sight. So it was not to be seen at all. Excluded from sight. It means that the average person anybody who came into the church.
Okay, so what were the jewels?
The truth.
Okay, what truths? What truths?
The ones on the chart.
The ones on the chart.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the 1919 Bible Conference, W.W. Prescott attempted to discard every prophetic truth of the Millerites. Every prophetic truth. And the only one, they let him get away with it, but there's only one that they allowed him to keep. The 2300 days. But even that is it's empty. It's empty. When you have the 2300 days and you don't have the 2520, then Daniel 8:13, that question cannot be fulfilled. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? The answer is 1844. The 2300 is addressing the sanctuary, but the 2520 is addressing the host. If you don't have the host, then you've got an empty sanctuary, because the sanctuary was designed so that God might dwell among the host. So they let him keep the Adventism kept the 2300, but when they threw out the 2520, they gutted it. And so you're right, all the truths are covered from sight from 1919 onward. And Tanya, did you have your hand? No? Oh, Larry.
On the paragraph previous, it says that he began to plead with them in regards to these things that were scattered. But in the one that we just read, it says now he began to use physical force and push them out. So I don't know if there's a progression into meet it, or was it harder force?
Yeah, but you got to go in the history of that third generation. You come to 1930, and what happens in 1930? I'll make it easier. What happens in 1929?
Oh, it was when they accredited this.
No. That probably maybe in then too. But what happened in 1929? Great Depression. Great Depression. Okay, and so the Adventist Church uses the Great Depression to say that we have to consolidate our employees. because we're in a financial crisis. And there was a conference around Tacoma Park, Maryland, where Washburn and these guys that were fighting for the pioneer position, they were pastors in those conferences. And what did they do based upon the premise that we're now in the Great Depression? They eliminated that conference and they scattered those guys around the world to different conferences. So there was a war going on that Adventism hasn't recognized. I mean, they were in a pitched battle, and the faithful guys, the conferences they were in got eliminated, and they got sent down the road. So the escalation of the shaking is being noted in here, and when you get to that third generation, it gets serious. That's why Andreasen, they have to give him his credentials back after he's dead, because they unjustly disfellowshipped him, but it couldn't stand. So ultimately they have to straighten things out.
Type of kingly power that fired us at Hope.
Yeah.
If you look at the concept or the principle that, the truth, the devil's always trying to put down the truth and to do that, but in the very act of disbanding them and scattering them, it just, you can do nothing against the truth before the truth, because that allowed it to even spread more. Because,
it buried it.
Yeah?
Yeah, because in 1957 you get to the end of that generation and they've written questions and doctrines, and now you're in darkness.
Okay, all right.
You can't see those truths anymore.
All right.
Anyone else? Next paragraph.
When I was thus weeping and mourning for my great loss and accountability, I remembered God.
There's something I've been working for on the last couple of weeks. Where is William Miller when he remembers God?
Daniel 9.
Daniel 9, Leviticus 26, verses 40 to 45. You realize that you're scattered, that the scattering's taken place, and what you're to do in Leviticus 26, 40 to 45 is remember that God is willing to be in a covenant relationship with you. And what I'm saying is the remember here is a key that places William Miller's dream right here after 9/11. In fact, it's not after 9/11. Where do you have to be in history before you can see Daniel's prayer in our history? I know that sounds like an awkward question, but I've said it in this room a couple times over the past couple of weeks. Even if it's wrong, you could remember my wrongness. When was the 2520 discovered? 2005. What does the 2005 or what does the 2520 open up to you? It's typified by Josiah, right? Josiah is going to straighten up the sanctuary, and they discover the law. And what law is it that was discovered by Josiah? It's the curses. Josiah realizes, hey, we're suffering from the curse of God based upon the law of Moses. That's the 2520. We don't even recognize that till after post 2005. We recognize the 2520. Do any of us understand what it means? No, so you can't get to the remedy of Leviticus 26, 40 to 45 until you understand what Leviticus 26 is. You have to first understand the 2520, and then you're at the point to where you can be like Daniel and wake up and realize, hey, I'm in a foreign country. I've been scattered. Or you can be like Miller here, who realizes all the original truths are buried, and I lost the war. And he begins to weep, and then he remembers the covenant God. And I'm saying that takes place actually somewhere after 2005 in our history, but at least after 9/11. Okay.
I remembered God and earnestly prayed that He would send me help. Immediately, the door opened, and a man entered the room.
Okay, so I kind of countered my question here. I agree with everything I just said, but I'm going to give you a question that we'll see. It'd be hard for you to answer because of what I just said, but nevertheless, we'll explain it. What's it mean that there was a door opened? To Seventh-day Adventists, when you say there's a door opened, what does that mean? That's as a human being. What does it mean that there's a door open to a Seventh-day Adventist? Okay, you guys are getting low grades on this question. Pardon me? You're close. You're closer, but where's the phrase? What happens on October 22nd, 1844? A door is closed and a door is opened. So when there's a door opened, for Adventists, there's also a door closed. And what does this closing door and opening door represent? A change of dispensation. So Miller's, when he's weeping, he's at a change of dispensation. And what's a change of dispensation? It's not post 2005, it's 9/11. Okay, there's a door opened and a door closed at 9/11. What's the change of dispensation there? Judgment of the dead to the judgment of the living. Okay, so this is placing this in the judgment of the living time period. But I'm also acknowledging that he doesn't remember God. In our history, we didn't fulfill it on time. We don't see the 2520 until post 2005. And you have to see that to know that you're scattered and that you're in a Laodicean condition.
When the people all left it, and he, having a dirt brush in his hand, opened the windows and began to brush the dirt and rubbish from the room, I cried to him to forbear, and there were some precious jewels scattered among the rubbish. He told me, fear not, for he would take care of them.
Okay, so before you go to the next page, every time I'm sharing this Miller's dream, and I get to this point, I think, I wish Daniel Fontenot was here, because most of you in here may not realize it, but a year and a half ago or so, and it's probably recorded, it was after we were recording, maybe you'll know, Daniel Fontenot did a sermon on the brush. Okay, anyone remember that? And the brush in the Bible comes from the juniper tree. And a juniper is a plant that is known for purification. Even now, you can go get juniper berries and make juniper berry tea, and it's for cleansing your blood, okay? But the brooms in the Bible were made from juniper, and it marks a purification that takes place. And Daniel went through the places where this broom or in the Bible or this brush is mentioned, and you can see every one of them is putting at 9/11, 9/11, 9/11. And this is a corresponding or parallel work to Christ coming in that's going to clean his floor, not with a brush, but with what? A fan. Okay, he's going to use a fan to sweep the rubbish out the window. So there's parallel symbols here on the work that's going on. What does open the windows mean? Truth. When he opens the windows,
I thought that's where he cleans up the false jewels.
that's the obvious. A man entered the room when the people all left it, and he, having a dirt brush in his hand, opened the windows and began to brush the dirt and rubbish out of the room. That's self-evidence.
Cleaning out.
But what's the opening of the windows also represent? He's going to open the windows of heaven at that point. So this is another. Now, is he sweeping out the jewels that are human beings or the doctrines? Both, really? You think so?
Yes.
Read it in context. Read it again. Immediately the door opened, and a man entered the room when the people all left it. Okay, so he's doing a doctrinal work here. the people are going to leave
On their own.
at the end. They're going to leave on their own, but they're going to be dealt with at the end of the everlasting gospel. Anyway, that's in there. Who says fear not in the scriptures? Christ. He's the dirt brush man. Clayton?
Then while he brushed the dirt and the rubbish, false jewels and counterfeit coins all rose and went out the window like a cloud, and the wind carried them away. In the bustle I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened, the rubbish was gone. The precious jewels, the diamonds, the gold, the silver coins lay scattered in profusion all over the room.
What's it mean that the wind carried them away? What's the 9/11? What's the winds at 9/11? Islam. Okay, and we've taught that Adventism, in the disobedient prophet, where does the disobedient prophet die? What's illustrated at his death?
The ass and the lion.
The ass and the lion. And we've taught that the disobedient prophet is Adventism. That was told by God, don't go back to where you came from. Where did Adventism come from? Protestants. But in the disobedient prophet, he goes back to the false prophet, which has got a false prophet is the symbol of apostate Protestantism. He goes back to apostate Protestantism and he ends up dead with two symbols. Who's the lion? King of the North, Babylon, Daniel 11:40-45. Adventism as typified by Josiah. They reject the warning message of Daniel 11. Did Josiah reject the warning message of Daniel 11? Yeah, he did. And he died where? At Megiddo, Armageddon. Okay, but the disobedient prophet, he also dies by the ass. What's an ass? Islam. Okay, so Adventism is rejecting both messages, the message of Daniel 11:40-45 and the message of Islam. At large, that's the general, we've taught that about Adventism for some time. But what about in this movement? Are there people in this movement that are going to get on the wrong side of the issue and get swept out by the wind? How?
By refusing to accept the way we set up Daniel 11:40-45, and also by not recognizing September 11th.
Yeah, the last part is where I'm getting at, and you can see them already doing it. They've already put themselves in a box, okay? They've come out and said, judgment of the living begins at midnight, all right? But they've also acknowledged that the sealing, the judgment of the living, it begins when Islam is restrained. But they've also taught that there is no restraint on Islam at midnight. When are the restraints on Islam marked? 9/11 in our history. 9/11, midnight cry, Sunday law. That's Balaam's 3 strikes. Balaam's the false prophet, the United States retaliating against the ass's activity. 9/11, midnight cry, Sunday law. But when the 4 winds, and what does Sister White define the 4 winds are? Angels are holding the 4 winds represented as an angry horse seeking to break loose and bring death and destruction in its path. Okay, so angels are holding the 4 winds when the sealing of the 144,000 begins, and the 4 winds are Islam at 9/11. So if we're going to say that no, the characteristics of 9/11 are at midnight, but at the same time you're saying there is no strike of Islam at midnight, then your understanding of the 4 winds is what's going to take you out of the work. The wind is going to sweep you away. A misunderstanding of Islam, and that's where these guys are at.
Okay, you say there's 3 strikes, and then you take 9/11, which is the first, then you said midnight cry, and then you say the Sunday law. So, but yet you say midnight and midnight cry are twins, and so there you would think that midnight and midnight cry, there would both be a strike.
You can think that, but
I don't understand that one. You know, as far as
How,
the three, and then you're leaving out midnight on this one, but it's, should be.
no, I'm not leaving out midnight. That is an established truth. We've understood 9/11, midnight cry, and Sunday law. Is Balaam's,
Yeah, 3 hits.
okay, what was the first hit? What's the essence of what the ass does at 9/11? He turns Balaam out of the way. Where was Balaam going? He was going to implement a Sunday law. Because when you bring Ezra 7:9 in here, you know that Ezra already had the third decree. But by the activities of Islam at 9/11, the Sunday law is restrained so that God's people can be sealed, right? Second time, what happens here?
Crushed.
Crushed between where?
The 2 walls.
What are the 2 walls?
Marriage and the Sabbath.
Marriage, Sabbath. In here, the second strike, the second restraint's placed on him. What happens here?
Crushed.
No, he falls down.
Falls down.
Falls down. This is the fall of the United States. Okay, so yeah, there's midnight cry has been typified by midnight, but that doesn't break the line of Balaam. Balaam has 3 markers. You got to line them up, and we've all agreed that they're here, here, here. What happens with Islam here? The caliphate. Okay, so there's an activity of Islam here that's typifying this activity of Islam, but it's not anything that there's a restraint or a retaliation brought about at midnight. Okay, so when the 4 winds are restrained here, the angry horse, the sealing of the 144,000 begins, and the sealing of the 144,000 is illustrated in Ezekiel 9. And when that angel goes through in Ezekiel 9 and he's putting a seal upon those that sigh and cry, what do you have to be in order to sigh and cry? You have to be alive. If you're not alive, you're not sighing and crying. Okay, so Ezekiel 9, the sealing of the 144,000 is the judgment of the living. The judgment of the living begins here, and they're saying no, the judgment of the living begins here, while at the same time they're saying there is no restraint placed upon Islam here. No restraint on the 4 winds here that marks the beginning of the sealing of the 144,000. So one of the places where they're going off into darkness is over Islam, and I'm saying that what carries them out the window to eternal oblivion is the wind. And the wind is the subject of Islam. They're incorrect on how they're approaching Islam. And it happened at the large level for Adventism, and it happens in this movement. What is going on back there? Nothing? Okay, next paragraph. Whose turn is it, Kathy?
He then placed on the table a casket much larger and more beautiful than the former, and gathered up the jewels, the diamonds, the coins, by the handful, and cast them into the casket, till not one was left, although some of the diamonds were not bigger than the point of a pin. He then called upon.
Wait,
Yeah, okay, go ahead. Read that sentence.
He then called upon me, come and see.
Okay, so why is the casket bigger? You don't help her. She read it. Why is the casket bigger, Kathy?
Because it had the spirit of prophecy.
Okay, you heard. All right. What's it mean that he cast them into the casket? I mean, usually if you had a jewel and you were going to put it, you'd put it in
Yeah,
the
I know.
casket.
Why would you cast
Why is he
it in?
casting it
I
into
don't
the
know.
casket?
Almost like he's just tossing it in there.
I used to understand the answer to that question because I have it boldface, which tells me that it's a key for me when I'm teaching it to make a point, but I don't remember why he cast it in the casket any longer.
He had a handful at one time.
Yeah, okay, but
So
why doesn't he take that handful and put them in right where they go at one time.
What does that word cast mean, to throw?
Yeah. And he then called and said, come and see. So Brother Bob, where is he now at this new casket?
The opening of the seventh seal.
It's definitely the opening of a seal.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
Come and see. Okay, the casket's in place. This is the final development of truth, but it's not in Millerite history. It's in our history. Next paragraph, Sister Tanya.
I looked into the casket, but my eyes were dazzled with the sight. They shone with 10 times their former glory. I thought they had been scorned in the sand by the feet of those wicked persons who had scattered and trod them in the dust. They were arranged in beautiful order in the casket, every one in its place, without any visible pains of the men who cast them in. I shouted with very joy, and that shout awoke me.
Okay, so when's there a cry at midnight that awakes you? That's self-evident.
Scattered here, Brother Bill. Did you notice that?
Pardon me?
At number 8, there's another scattered here that is not counted.
I pointed that out already.
You did?
Yeah, that there's scatterings that come after his weeping.
He said that, you just said there's 7 before.
It's the scattering takes place before his weeping. When he's weeping now, he's John in John chapter 5, that no one can open it. At midnight, there's a cry that awakes you. So where is he going to see this new beautiful casket that shines 10 times brighter, that stimulates him to give this awakening shout? No. Cause and effect, Sister Tanya. The effect is here. So where's the cause? It's got to come before.
Well, of course.
It's going to shine 10 times brighter. It's the prediction before midnight. We're not arguing about whether it's May 2nd or not. We're standing upon the truth that there's too many witnesses that before you get to midnight, there's a prediction.
Which would be the same as 1840 when they did the prediction and it came and it brought such an impetus into the group.
You mean 1838, 1840?
Mm-hmm.
This is the 7th seal. The final seal, the final development in our history comes before midnight. And that final development, which is the 7th seal, is the Lord casting in these truths in the context of the Bible and Spirit of prophecy that are 10 times more powerful than the Millerite history. So where do we typically put the 10 times? Between the midnight cry and the Sunday law. That's where we typically put it. But where's the actual perfect fulfillment of the latter rain? Sunday law. So here is actually the 10 times. This is the loud cry message. The climax of it. But it gets typified here, here, and even here.
That would be 38. Again, midnight before.
Not worried about 38 and 40. I want to make a point here. At the close of human probation, you have 7 plagues, right? Then you have the second coming. Then what do you have after the second coming? No. You do, but the detail. What's next? 7 days. 7 days. And what are you going to do when you get to heaven?
Receive a crown.
You're going to receive a crown.
7 days to get there.
You're going to go. There's a place there's a place where when we get to heaven with the Lord, that the gate of the city is going to be held open. And do you know who Sister White says opens the gate? God the Father. Okay, this here, at the end of this 7 days, and it's conjectured by Adventists that this is some kind of preparation for getting to the holy city. This 7 days preparation is to enter into New Jerusalem. So what is it? When we enter into New Jerusalem, if we're faithful, what is it when Christ brings us with Him into New Jerusalem? It's the triumphal entry. It's the perfect fulfillment of the triumphal entry. It's what the Romans did when they conquered someone and they came back to Rome and they had all the captives with them to show their victory. Only these aren't captives in a cage. These are captives that have been freed from sin. My point is this. All of this history is about the triumphal entry, and the triumphal entry is the entry into the New Jerusalem. And all of these are prefiguring it. Because when Sister White talks about the midnight cry in the Millerite history, what does she say typifies it in the time of Christ? The triumphal entry. All of this this here is the beginning of the triumphal entry into the New Jerusalem. Where does it start? It starts back over here. In 1844. You have the midnight cry right here, which is the triumphal entry. And Sister White says, had all those, how does she say it? Had all the virgins been faithful, and it's not coming to me, we would have entered the kingdom ere this, something along that. In here, at the midnight cry in the Millerite history, the Lord is beginning the triumphal entry into the New Jerusalem. Okay, it's a step-by-step process, but what happens to the triumphal entry? It gets sidetracked in 1863 by our wandering in the wilderness for 40 years because of our disobedience. And where does 1863 come back into? Where does the 1863, this ending point, get reinitiated? How many 2520s were there in Millerite history? There's 2. Okay, this is a period of apostasy, of marked apostasy. And if you go 126 years or 126 years, it's bringing you to 1989 and 2014. And it's telling you that this apostate history here is going to begin these 2 figurative 2520s, but it's going to reinitiate what began back here, which is the triumphal entry. The midnight cry is the triumphal entry. And by the time you get to 2014 in this history here, the Lord is reinitiating the march into the New Jerusalem. And that's why for years, it doesn't seem to click, but I've put this in place because it makes sense to me. Sister White says the loud cry symbolizes an increasing of power. As Seventh-day Adventists, we think, the loud cry is the latter rain at the Sunday law. That's not what she says. The loud cry represents an increase of power all the way to the end, and that's what's happening in the story of the midnight cry and the triumphal entry. Is step by step, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. But we're going to go into the New Jerusalem in the perfect fulfillment of this. So we didn't quite pull the trigger. I didn't quite pull the trigger on the remembering, but it's in place. Because I'm saying that over here, in this history is where William Miller's remembering, and all of this is coming back, and that this remembering is a reference to the awakening to the fact that you're scattered, the Laodicean message.
At the physical level, the triumphal entry happened on the 10th day of the first month, where they were supposed to choose their lamb.
At the physical level,
Yeah, at the literal level, the way it happened, the triumphal day happened on the 10th day of the first month, where they were supposed to choose the lamb for the Passover.
okay, so you're saying there's two lines of thoughts here. One, he's having the triumphal entry, but based upon the Passover in Egypt and there onward, there was a specific day when they were to choose the lamb that was going to be offered at Passover, and that day was the very day of the triumphal entry.
And whole Jerusalem chosen Christ as their redeemer or whatever, or their king. Because they all bowed down to him, and
Well, not all of them, but
the
yeah.
majority of the people.
Yeah, it was a swelling, but I mean, there was
And then-
some people saying, make these people stop.
And then the leaders basically said that one man should die instead of a whole nation.
Perish.
And they already made that choice too.
Sister Carol, you want to have a closing prayer?
Oh, blessed Heavenly Father, how grateful we are to be here and with your saints and these truths are overwhelming to myself, but I just want to say thank you, and we praise you, Heavenly Father, for your light that's coming through your humble messengers. And we ask that you would be with us as we go about our day, and to do what is pleasing in your sight. And we just praise you and thank you in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior and our soon coming King. Please help us to do all the things that are, again, pleasing in your sight. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.